Vincent, thank you. So I'm going to introduce two speakers to you now, but first up, both working for Grant Thornton. First up is Rohan Singla, who's going to chat to us about incident response, and followed by Andrew Harbison, who's the director within Grant Thornton for digital forensics.
Thank you, Connor, and the Box Media team for having us here. Guys, to introduce myself, I work in the IT security services in Grant Thornton, and we offer a range of services, including ISO 27001 alignment and incident response. We've had some very good speakers this morning who have spoken about their journey to ISO 27001 certification, and they've also some of the speakers are trying to get the certification for their organization. Today, myself and Andy, who works in a digital forensic practice, what we are going to talk about is, will aligning yourself to a compliance standard like ISO or PCI, will that secure you? Will it stop you from getting hacked or from breaches or incidents in your organization? And that's exactly what we're going to talk about in the next few minutes. So the agenda over here is we look at the introduction, what the problem is with certification standards, ISO, PCI, and what do they help you do. The holistic approach, the solution to look at it, how bad is it, some of the incidents which have occurred in Ireland and globally, and you'll probably look at it and what can you do to solve it again. So ISO 27001, as most speakers have been talking about it this morning, it's an information security management standard. It's widely used standard for management and for the IT team. But something to be kept in mind, it's not a risk management strategy for any company. It is part of a risk management strategy, but it doesn't comply, it doesn't cover all your risks for an organization. Second point is certification auditors. They're there in your organization for a very short period, and it's very difficult for them to uncover all threats and vulnerabilities in your organization. So there are many threats and many risks in your organization which cannot be covered by the auditors because they're only there for a couple of days or a week max. ISO 27001, it makes you think about risks, and it might minimize the impact when a breach or an incident does occur. It'll make you think about risks before a breach and after a breach as well, which is one good point, and you're taking your organization toward the right step. Myths about ISO 27001. So we have many clients, and every organization has a myth about ISO 27001, and obviously some of you have come across it as well. The first one being it's a bunch of documents. Probably, as Vincent was saying, get a document, a set of documents, download it online and implement it. Ask your team and your organization to follow those documents. A classic standard being information security policy, encryption standard policies. It's an IT thing to manage, and I feel sorry for the IT team because your management pushes back to the IT team and they ask the IT team to get you an ISO 27001 certification without the board being involved and your managers. People mostly think it is around processes, policies, and procedures as opposed to the technical aspects of IT. So very less focus on your penetration testing or your system's configuration or your hardening standards over there. ISO 27001 certification, most organizations, what they think is it can help you get a tender or it can help you achieve a contract with a third party, and that's what most companies are doing these days. But the bigger organizations have become smart now. They have started doing penetration testing on smaller organizations which they're going to partner with, and that's where your ISO 27001 certification might not help you. It's actually a concern as well because most organizations are outsourcing their IT teams or their IT departments. And what you look at is, does the outsourcing company, does it have an ISO 27001 certification? They might have an ISO 27001 certification, but that doesn't comply or that doesn't look at all the risks of that outsourcing company. And even though you have outsourced the IT functionality, the risk of your organization still lies with you. So it's up to you to make sure that the risk of your company is looked after. The last myth and the bigger one is everyone who has an ISO 27001 certification feels that they're secure from hacks and from incidents occurring. Mind you, an incident can be a breach or it can be an internal incident, as some of our speakers have said already. It can be a simple data theft, someone taking data on a USB drive. Gray areas about any compliance standard, be it ISO, be it PCI, the payment card industry. Does it mandate you to perform technical security assessments? What most compliance standards, they go up to a certain level, be it your antivirus. Do you have antivirus in your organization? Yes. but is it configured properly? That's something that's not being looked into. Encryption standard, again, if you see some of the bigger hacks like Target, Home Depot, and the big credit card hacks, they had encryption standards deployed in the organization, but was the encryption proper and was it covering the whole organization over there, which is not being looked after by any compliance standard, and frankly, you don't have the time for the auditors to come and look into it. Assess all threats and vulnerabilities to your organization as opposed to the area to be certified. This is again an area which we come across many organizations to get an ISO 27001 certification. They have a certain scope in mind and they get a certain network or certain part of a network certified, be it PCI or ISO as well. But then your organization, the risks to your organization are much bigger and wider as opposed to a small network which is ISO 27001 certified. So you need to have a risk management strategy for the whole organization as opposed to a small part of your organization. Security awareness sessions, again, the threats are evolving day by day, and it's becoming more manual, the breaches. So ISO and the other compliance standards do cover it, and they have a point saying, are you running security awareness sessions? But what you see nowadays is the hackers or the breaches, they have become more smart. So what they do is they have targeted sessions or targeted emails to each and every team. So someone like a finance team will have a completely different incident or an email as opposed to the administrators or the help desk team. So your awareness sessions have to evolve as well. They have to be targeted to a particular team. Your finance team needs to be aware of different issues which cover a finance team as opposed to someone at the help desk. To give you a prime example, a financial accountant, they might get emails pointing from a CFO saying transfer this and this money to our account, which is not something an IT admin will get. So the finance team has to be aware of these issues and they have to be taken into account when you do your security awareness sessions. The last point is many business approach compliance to a standard by trying to minimize. Yes, this is something we looked at. Organizations are trying to minimize the scope and trying to get a certification as opposed to looking at the risks to their whole organization. And does a compliance standard help you really protect from a hack or a breach? We'll probably find the answer in the next slide. Target hack, obviously all of you are aware of it. And this is a slide which comes from the US Senate report. And the very first part, if you see, it's highlighted in red. Target was certified as a PCI DSS compliant organization in September 2013. And they were pretty much hacked the very next month. So does it really help you stop breaches? No. Does it help you think in the right direction? Yes. But the problem is the organization doesn't think about all risks, third-party risks and other risks which are there in an organization. So how do you solve this problem? You probably take a holistic approach. You take ISO 27001 standard, but along with the standard, you need to have different risk management strategies to cover it. So risk management strategy, your risks, threats, and vulnerabilities are constantly evolving in an organization. The hackers are becoming smart day by day. The incidents are becoming smart. The threats external to an organization are very high, but the threats internally, the internal threats are rising day by day as well. An organization's wide risk management activity on a regular basis over a mandated checklist. So rather than having a checklist, you need to be smart and you need to have a team of IT auditors, you need to have a team of IT security professionals, you need to have a team of developers thinking of the risks which lie within the organization. And this is a bottom-up approach or a top-down or top-up, which many speakers have been talking about. So you need your board involved in this. That's why you have your board awareness sessions. You need your board to buy into your security risk assessment rather than just being at ISO 27001. So threats and vulnerabilities should be identified constantly for all systems, because as we said, the threats are evolving constantly, right? We can have a pen test or a technical assessment or a risk assessment at one stage in a year. If we have it in January, the threats or the risks in June might be completely different from January. You have your zero-day vulnerabilities which are coming in every day. Defense in depth risk management strategy. Again, it ties with your encryption standard or your antivirus. You might have an encryption policy or you might have encryption implemented in your organization, but is it end-to-end? Is your data encrypted while in transit, while it is being stored? That is something which you have to look at as part of your risk management strategy. Then finally, you should have your incident response plans and strategy in place, because give it time, or an incident is just waiting around the corner to happen. It might be an external incident or an internal incident. So you need to be prepared how to respond to incidents so that you can minimize the impact, and what risks are there to your organization and how quickly can you respond is something which you should be thinking about. To give you an example of technical security assessments, the next slide, it looks into penetration testing in detail and what a hacker is thinking of doing when he's trying to breach your organization externally. So what most compliance standards do is they ask you to do a vulnerability analysis on your organization, constantly check for issues or vulnerabilities which are there in your organization, as opposed to exploiting them and rating the risk. And obviously it is difficult for you to solve all the risks in your organization, so you have to take a approach wherein you solve all the critical risks at a given time, and then you go to your medium risks and then the low risks. And when you try to exploit vulnerabilities, you'll find out what risks are critical to your organization as compared to other organizations. We obviously know one size does not fit all, and that's why the risk to your organization might be different to the risk to another organization. So what you see with most automated tools is they come back to you with a standard or a rating, which is pretty standard. Like, say, a high risk SQL injection is high for any application, but it might not be very high for your organization because you have a different control over there. So that's something to be looked into. Penetration testing, it's one example of technical security assessments. You can look into different security assessments as well. The next one, the last point over here, is incident response plan, the next steps. So as part of this, you need to have proper plans and procedures in place to help you to respond to incidents. People should be aware of their responsibilities. What you find normally is you have an incident and the IT team or the person handling the incident doesn't know where to go to. He's trying to contact everyone in the company. You should probably have a point of contact, your tree, your incident response tree, where everyone is responsible for their own areas. An incident in a finance team should probably go to someone in the finance team, and the right team is involved, someone from your media communication team, so that there's proper advertisements or proper communication being made with the public. Plans to minimize the impact of an incident when it does occur. How do you respond to an incident? Do you have a team to respond to it? Do you have forensic analysts to respond to it? Can you stop the breach at a given time? That's something to be thought about and to be involved in your process and your plan. The last one is very interesting, actually, cyber insurance. That's what you think most companies are going towards these days. That will minimize your monetary loss, but it won't obviously minimize the reputational impact. But some organizations are thinking about it because the cyber insurance companies, they have a proper plan in place to respond to an incident. They have forensic analysts, they have a security team, they have a lawyer, and they have the media team as well who help you respond to an incident. And that's some organizations are thinking about it, and probably something for you to think about as well. I'll hand it over to Andy over here, who will talk about some of the recent incidents which have happened in Ireland and globally, and then finally the solution for that. Thank you.
A Chinaman once said, you've got to know your enemy and know yourself. So I'm going to talk for the next 15 minutes about knowing your enemy. About 10 years ago, we would have seen hackers as looking something like this. It's a bunch of spotty gits looking for something to do in the afternoon when they're not in school or working late at night. Not terribly organized, not terribly opportunistic, not terribly dangerous, more or less opportunistic. And this is actually still the case. We've got TalkTalk here, which occurred a few months ago. TalkTalk was hacked up by a 15-year-old and a 16-year-old. They got in using a thing called a SQL inject hack on their website. Very old-fashioned hack. Between you and me, should never have been allowed to happen. SQL injects have been around for about 15 years. In this case, however, there was a difference between those hackers as they hacked in 2015 and how they might have hacked in 2005. That is, in 2015, they'd have gone on the internet and shown off to their friends about how they'd hacked TalkTalk. In 2015, they sold the data they stole into a Russian dark web website looking for money. The problem is, you see, hackers aren't amateurs anymore. They're businessmen. They're extraordinarily and well organized. So they make the mafia look like a bunch of amateurs. Now, part of the tradition, I'm a security guy talking about security things. So by tradition, I've got to now start off with a gigantic hack. So let's talk about Carbonac. Anyone ever hear of Carbonac? Carbonac, well, I'm surprised no one really has, because it's the biggest bank robbery in history. It occurred between about 2013 and 2015. The reason why you haven't heard about it is they didn't hit one bank. It wasn't so much a bank raid as a process for raiding banks. What they do is they send people inside the banks, anybody they could get a name of, a nice little Trojan horse program in their email. Once they were on the systems from this Trojan horse, they worked their way slowly, carefully, not to cause any damage, across the way into the ATMs, where they subvert the ATMs and use petty criminals to turn up at the bank ATM, put in a fake card, and take money out in cash. You may not be able to see the slide too well, but there's a list of the things. They hit about 24 countries. And they were only caught, so I won't say caught, stopped, when they got a little over-aggressive in an ATM in Kiev in the Ukraine, and the thing just started spitting out money on its own. But they cleared somewhere, Kaspersky estimates they cleared somewhere between $500 million and $1 billion by the time they got to it. Well, you're paying the insurance. So, now, this is scary. I'm sure you've had this morning, I wasn't here this morning, lots of people talking about big hacks. For the rest of the day, I'm not going to talk about big hacks. Yes, there is a chance you're going to be hit by a big hack. I hope not. If you've got something very juicy and very valuable on your networks, credit card numbers, social security numbers in the US, for example, health details, somebody might come after you. You're really probably quite attractive for them to go after. And if you suffer from a thing called what's known as an advanced persistent threat, a bad guy who really, really wants you, not just anybody, you, then you're in trouble, because they're going to be, there's a lot of things they can do to catch you. But what I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about are the kind of threats everybody's being hit by at the moment. Now, how can we speak about this? Because Grant Thornton International, one of the things we do is support insurance firms. Insurance firms who sell cyber insurance. When an insurance firm sells cyber insurance, they need a fire brigade. We're the fire brigade. So let's talk about some of the things we've seen in the last few months. I can talk about DD4BC because they were from Bosnia and were caught 2 months ago. But there were pretty good practitioners of an attack known as a denial of service attack. Denial of service has really evolved over the years. It's again, for pretty much a business. If you want to carry out a denial of service attack, I just get yourself on the web and start looking for organizations called booters or stressors. This is a service you can hire, and this is what these guys used to do. So they would send an email. Here's an email. In fact, one of the emails they sent. What does it say? Hi. The top says, let's listen to you. You may know us from the places we've hacked in the past. Then it goes on, essentially, nice network you've got there. Shame if someone broke it. He said, we're going to denial of service you for an hour, and then you're going to pay us, in this case, 20 bitcoins. I've actually seen this versions of this email from various targets, and they move from between 10 bitcoin to 40 bitcoin. Current going rate for Bitcoin is about $400. They charged targets appropriately. You see, they want people to pay. They don't want to go messing around, issuing additional threats. They want to make the threat just enough that it's worthwhile paying them off. They give you 24 hours. In this particular case, the guys couldn't get the money together didn't respond in 24 hours, so they assumed the email had gone into the spam filter. So they emailed them again and said, look, we'll give you another 24 hours to pay up. They don't want to have to denial of service you. Why? Because they don't have their own denial of service network. They're paying a service provider to run the denial of service for them. And they don't have to pay the service provider to actually denial of service somebody for days. You just want to pay them for an hour or two and then move on to the next target, the next target. You only make money at this if you're hitting hundreds of targets, not just one. So that's what we're dealing with. Organized crime. I went on to one of the main dark websites a few weeks ago, looking at the list of the current top 10 stressors. So number one is, as usual, network stressor, the one and only. You can stress at about 120 Gbps. That's the amount of data they can throw at a target. My favorite, though, was number 6, which is a group called Layer 4. And in the comments section about the organization, the description was good power. They can do 80 Gbps, that's very good. Friendly staff. Yes, if you're going to be hiring your denial of service provider, service is an issue. Why? Because these are businesses. Okay, the next thing we're seeing, lots of, at the moment, all over the world, is ransomware. Anyone had a ransomware infection yet? Sure, plenty of you. Ransomware, if you're not aware of what it is, someone in your company gets a little email or goes into the wrong website. A piece of software comes down onto your network, usually 0-day, so your antivirus will not stop it, and starts encrypting stuff on the drive. Doesn't encrypt everything, just looks for Microsoft Office files, PDFs, mails, quietly starts encrypting them. And when it's found all at once and wants to encrypt, it pops one of these little windows up saying, hi, we've just encrypted all your important files. Pay us 1 or 2 Bitcoin and we'll pass you the decryption keys. And actually, 2 times out of 3, if you pay them, they'll give you the decryption key. This is an absolute money spinner. They're making millions out of this. More worryingly, the tools are getting better and better and better. I'll talk to you about a couple recently. In the last month or so, we've had 2 nasty bugs come out. One is called TeslaCrypt 3.0. TeslaCrypt is like all the others. So in other words, it gets onto networks, onto computers, using various vulnerabilities, usually over the web, and typically using a vulnerability in Flash, Adobe Flash. What does it do? It does the same thing. It encrypts everything as usual. But it also looks for save files for video games and MP3s. Because it doesn't just target companies, it targets prosperous individuals. If you've spent 2 months developing a character on Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto, you'll probably pay a few £100 to have that save file for that character released so you can continue to play your game. So that's TeslaCrypt. It'll also knock off your MP3s in case you're a big music fan. The other one, which is even scarier, this one's right out in the last couple of weeks, is one called Locky. It's a version of another tool called CryptoLocker. Locky's Russian. How do we know? Well, I'll tell you in a second. And Locky was distributed about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3, in a mass spam emailing. People would get a spam email, and there'd be a Microsoft Word attachment to it, which if they opened it up, now people say, that's Microsoft Word, what harm can Microsoft Word do? They'd open it up, it would be garbled, and a little message came down the bottom saying you're going to have to run macros, Word macros, in order to read this. It was a Word macro virus, a classic from 18 years ago, perhaps. What it then did, the moment you ran it, it dropped. It said it was what's known in the trade as a dropper. It dropped the actual Locky malware, which then went on the encryption process. Locky's got a couple of other wrinkles, though. It doesn't just encrypt the computer it's on and the shares to which the computer has access, like any other malware. It'll also scan the network and look for other computers that might be vulnerable before it starts encrypting stuff. I know it's known to be Russian because, amazingly, if the Microsoft Word version is opened in, is the Russian language version of Word, it doesn't activate. So, as I said, we can pretty sure where it comes from. Another interesting link about Locky is if you go online and do a search for Locky decryption, you'll find lots of people selling Locky decryption software, none of which works. Locky uses proper PKI encryption keys. There's no commercial software. It's just an extra layer of extortion out of people. So, very organized, very thoughtful. One of the reasons why I think, and don't get me wrong, I'm very positive about ISO 27001, but there's limits to it. It's this. Most attacks these days are not made against the infrastructure. Very few people go through the trouble of going to your website or punching their way through your firewalls. Why? Because there's an obviously vulnerable part of your organization. It's your staff. And there's typically going to be someone inside your organization who can be persuaded to do something stupid. We all know about phishing. I have an uncle in Nigeria. Give me your bank account details. But there are other things you can come across. Phishing, voicemail phishing. Anyone had a phone call from the Bangalore Microsoft scareware scam? Yeah, okay. One thing, by the way, might be interesting to know is that when they're phoning you up, they're using phone resources hacked from somebody else. They hack people's PABXs so that they can dial through. We know about spear phishing, which is phishing at a particular target. The classic spear phish, for example, would be what's known as the Western Union scam. Find somebody on Facebook who's a great traveler. Send email to all the people who are that individual's friends saying, hi, this is X. I'm in Uzbekistan. Someone's stolen my wallet. You wouldn't Western Union me $3,000 so that I can get home, would you? Works pretty well. The latest one we're seeing in spear phishing is an upgraded version of what's called whaling, which is spear phishing against really big targets. So one I've seen recently was an individual who had their Hotmail hacked, got a Trojan. Bad guys took over this high net worth individual's Hotmail, sent an email from the Hotmail to their finance manager or their asset manager, asking them to transfer a whole lot of money to Bulgaria. The money went to Bulgaria. Why? It came from the right email address. Okay, but all this stuff is very simple. And it's about hacking the mind. It's about hacking people and other things. My favorite one at the moment, hilarious, is called baiting. You don't come across baiting? How do I get into your organization? Dead easy. What I do is I buy a few of these USB sticks, stick something new and fancy on it, nice little piece of malware, 0 days so your antivirus doesn't pick it up, and I walk around the car park, dropping them in your car park. I wonder what happens then. Right. So, I can talk about old-fashioned credit card theft. What I will do, however, is show you, this is where they get sold. This is Rescator. Ever come across Rescator before? Rescator is the Amazon of the dark web. You want to sell some stolen credit cards? It's the place. So let's see what you can buy. There's a nice Discovery card and MasterCard for sale. $7.50 each, not bad. They're probably a bit old. You can get as much as $40 for a brand new, pristine, pinched card. But if you want to do the top right hand, bulk orders, low prices, if you don't want to go mucking about with just one credit card. It's a business. This is the wholesaling end of the business. If you steal a credit card from someone's network, you don't go and sell it yourself. You put it for sale on this thing. Here's another piece of news for you. This site has been running for 3 or 4 years. It's run by a guy called Andrei Hodorevsky, who's in eastern Ukraine. I've just given you the guy's name. He hasn't been picked up yet. There's no police going to save you if this happens. The latest upgrade, by the way, on that very subject to Rescator, is it now has a police detector. They've worked out that police and banks coming in and buying cards and checking to see where the breaches occurred makes the cards depreciate too quickly. So what they do now is they block the good guys getting onto the site, so you can't do that. Some other things. This is a classic one. Any of you suffered from this? Someone walking off with data on a USB stick or in Dropbox, etc.? No hands? Well, about 1 in 4 of you have. You just don't know it. There's ubiquitous in this country. Anyone leaving the organization, many people leaving organizations just fill up a USB stick or go to Dropbox or stick it on an iPad. On one occasion, sticking on a digital camera, you name it, they just walk off with it and bring it somewhere else. Very often you don't know it's happened until years later. We dealt with a case last year where a service company was going through its computers and found the complete payment details for a large multinational on their computers. Why? Because a previous member of staff had walked off with them and loaded upon their own machines. That made for some fairly sensitive negotiations. Okay, so I've done all the scary stuff. You know, how bad can it get? Well, we talk about the guy. There's a joke, you know, this guy running auto configuration turns on his computer and starts trying to reconfigure this Airbus A310, you know, plug and play, the hazards of. But then you had the guy last year who, on an American Airlines flight, broke into the engine control systems for the entertainment system, causing the plane to sideslip. That's not scary enough. How about the hack in Ukraine on the 23rd of December? At a site unfortunately called, from my memory's perspective, Pre-Karpaty Oblenergo, where they broke into the electricity grid control systems. Lovely hack. There was a Russian crew called Sandworm. got in, planted a whole lot of logic bombs to go off in 90 minutes, real, Ocean's 11 style. Got onto the control systems, switched off 800,000 people's power supply, and then blew up all the control systems so they had to be turned back on manually. So many people in the Ukraine were switched off for Christmas. Another one, hack, December 2014. A bunch of Chinese got onto a steel mill in Germany and turned off a blast furnace. What were they doing? They were on the process control systems, actually in the process control systems, trying to work out how the steel was made. The mill was making steel for gun barrels, and tank armor. Or how about upstate New York, where Iranian hackers took over the control systems on a dam 2 weeks ago. This is how bad it's getting. Okay, so incident response. I hope you've seen this. If you haven't, go to the NIST, National Institute of Science and Technology, NIST Incident Response Model. It's superb. If you want to have a look at it again, or another location, look for ISO 27001, 2013, A16.15 and 16, which has been pinched it pretty much verbatim. How do you handle an incident? Firstly, work out how you're going to identify it. Anyone know how they're going to identify an incident? Well, if you don't know, find out. Firstly, then validate, make sure you've got it. You need a process to work out how whether or not it's an incident or not. Then you have to register. What we find a lot of cases is people have an incident. So for example, Target, they had an incident response system yelling its head off for days, but no one registered an attack was underway. Then assess it, work out how big a problem this is, then decide who to notify. Varies by the incident. So for example, if you've got an incident, a data breach like that, one of the people you're going to have to notify is a lawyer immediately. Don't think about notifying a lawyer, notify the lawyer. Go on, sort the problem out, possibly with help from someone like me. Move on to feedback to people who are waiting for information. Fix it. What I mean by fixing a problem is not making the hack go away. It's finding out what allowed the hack to occur and making sure it never happens again. Properly report on what happened, and then revise your incident response plan. Anyone got an incident response plan here? Well, if you don't get one, you need one now. And it's not in force until you've tested it. What I mean is you can war game it, sit down around a table, work out if this happens, how would I act? We did one with a big financial services company about 2 months ago, and we actually war gamed an actual incident. The incident was your credit card data from your company ends up on the net, the Gardaí tell you, what do you do? From that ground. They did reasonably well and only broke the law 3 times in the first half hour in their reaction. But that was doing well. So, an incident response plan is not an incident response plan unless you've thought about how you're going to do it. If you ever have one, you want to give me a call? I'll sort you out. Thanks very much.
Thanks very much indeed, Andy. I think we all learned something from that. So questions, I have a couple have come in, so as always we'll give preference to the ones that came in earlier on the chat roll. And a question from Mr. Cotter at SYK, and this is addressed to Mark. Sorry, gents, you've all got your mics yet. Does 2018 apply to infrastructure as a service?
Yes, so the simple answer is that yes, it does. If you actually look at what the policy security ISO says, it relates to personal data that's held on a public cloud environment. So if you're acquiring infrastructure as a service or you're providing that to customers and you're holding personal data in a public cloud environment, yes, it will apply. Okay,
thank you. And one for revenue. This one came in anonymously, perhaps understandably. Does refusal / non-compliance with the policy become a performance management review issue if the PowerPoint or death by PowerPoint doesn't work?
Yes, it's on people's performance report to comply with the standard, so it does become a disciplinary issue.
Very good. We might just stop that one there and make sure we don't libel anyone. And chatting to Grant Thornton, now I'll ask you one question each in theory for each of you, but obviously feel free to comment. So Rohan, just those penetration tests you're talking about, I'm trying to think of a good way to phrase this, but how often do those penetration tests fail to penetrate a company?
So it depends on how often you do it, right? If an organization is doing it twice annually, the first one you'll probably penetrate, you'll find a lot of vulnerabilities and you'll exploit it the second time round, because the organizations have done it once in the year, they have fixed most issues, so it becomes more difficult to penetrate or exploit them the next time round. So it's advised to have it twice annually, but depending on the size of the organization, it changes. Some organizations decide to have it once annually or once every quarter. So it depends on the size and breadth of the organization.
It also depends very much on the scope. So, for example, if you let us get into your organization, then they succeed an awful lot.
Okay. So a continuous improvement process. And then maybe to Andy or either of you, but we gave us a lot of examples there of hackers hacking as a business. And I think you gave us a couple of comments about how often they keep their promises. But in broad terms, what are the chances of if you pay the money when you actually get the problem fixed?
We generally recommend that you don't. Of course, if you're absolutely desperate and you haven't taken backups, you are in trouble. I was speaking to one of the guys from PSNI, and they were saying it's usually about 2 times in 3. Often, once they've worked out you'll pay, they'll, if you're good for 1 Bitcoin, well, you might be good for 2 Bitcoin. And if you're good for 2 Bitcoin, well, maybe you're good for 4. To be honest, once they've got your money, there's not really interest in them in letting you off the hook.
Okay, they'll keep you on the hook.
And there's also an AML angle to that as well, because you don't know where the money is going, so there's anti-money laundering. So if the money is being used for some terrorist activities, your organization it can be implicated for those activities, eventually.
I mean, we talked about Locky. In Locky, you know exactly where the money's going, and there are controls over money transfers to Russia. So.
Yep, very good. Good advice. And then coming back to Mark, we're talking about the various services, but have you given, in terms of those contracts, what consideration is given to off-ramping, is the question that was put by Mr. McKenna.
So if we're talking about off-ramping in the sense of exit management, transition out, the cloud security standard does address that, because if you think about it, it's not just putting your data into the cloud, it's also what happens to get it off the cloud, so that the sort of the sanitation, the secure deletion, the processes that are there to make sure that when you leave the cloud provider or when you transition to another cloud provider, that the security and the sanitation there is addressed in the standard.
Very good. And another one for Vincent. Obviously, government, you can make your own rules to some extent. EU and others accepted, and the IRS accepted. But why are government and revenue adopting 27001?
Well, I suppose the initial, as I said in the presentation, was to counteract people not wanting to engage with us. But now it's come to a level of data sharing across government departments internationally. The third parties expect you to look after data they give you, as we would expect them to look after data. So, it's a key indicator there.
The global, the Panama Papers and that is helping.
Yeah, now 27,000 is not mandated, but an equivalent or an audit like that would be expected.
Very good. Okay. And then a question jointly for Rohan and Andy. You run us through quite a few scary stories there. Aside from obviously Grant Thornton being the go-to people, what's the first thing people should do in terms of, in the good, bad old days, what we do is we pull the plug on the computer. What should we do if something happens?
Well, pulling the plug of the computer is sometimes the thing to do. If I could say, the first thing you should do is think. I always say the first decision you have to make when dealing with an incident is the first decision you have to make is decide how much time you have to think about what you're going to be doing. Okay, it's very rare if you've got a hacker alive on your system. Well, you might think pull the plug straight away, but then again, given the way things are at the moment, they could have been on your system for 2 hours or 2 days. So, think.
Yeah, like to give you a prime example, right? Most of us have seen the denial of service attacks which have been happening on the government websites and the financial websites, right? The solution is very easy, but most people, they panic in those situations and they keep going around and they start talking to many people. You need to have a plan in place for that, but if you don't, you need to think, as Andy is saying, The solution is very easy in the denial of service attacks. We just have a proxy in front of it. So think about it and research about it before you make decisions, and have experts suggesting to you rather than just taking decisions. Because the denial of service attack, like the data centers, some people are trying to rip you off over here. The data centers will come back and say it will take 3 to 4 days to fix a solution, but you probably need to point your website to a proxy which is taking all the data and protecting you from those denial of service attacks. And the solution is pretty much half an hour or a 1 hour fix over there.
If I could give one piece of advice, and if you're ISO positive, you're doing this already, but logs. People will talk about firewalls and they'll talk about lots of hardware. It's very easy to justify putting in hardware. Why? Because when it comes to the balance sheet, it goes from the cash line to the capital line. It doesn't affect the bottom line. Processes, more difficult to justify. Logs are boring. No one reads logs. But if you're in an incident response situation of any kind, logs are utterly invaluable. Bad guys. Rohan was talking about the target hack. And the target hack, one of the things that bad guys did on the way out was they deleted the logs because they didn't want them picked up on. So if you can do anything at all, if it's a piece of software you want to invest in Splunk. It collects and analyzes the logs.
Very good. Okay, folks, we're going to take another comfort break here now. Back for 4 o'clock for Brian Honan from BH Consulting and Sean Brady from Cloud Assist. And obviously, feel free to come up and approach our expert speakers here in terms of your experience, etc., with all the hands we saw going up. But in the meantime, I'll just ask to say thank you in the traditional. Yeah.